with Alan Mosley.
Guys, welcome back for another episode of It's Too Late. I am your host, Alan Mosley, joined as always by the number one producer in late night. It's Blake Osborne.
You're too kind. You're too kind. I'm not number one.
Well,
like
what happened is I've already lied because we're not always joined by you because literally last week we weren't joined by you.
You're right. I was somewhere.
You were doing your civic duty. That's what you were doing.
Oh no.
No. What? Come on. Well, okay, so what happened is, and I explained this last week, it's not, Blake's fine, there's nothing wrong with Blake, but what happened is we were getting ready to do the show, and there was a bunch of nans going on with the election. And when we all went to bed Tuesday night, we all thought one thing. And then when we woke up Wednesday morning, they were saying something else.
Yeah.
So it was Wednesday, and it was the day of the show. And I had texted you, and I had said, if we record the episode, I mean, which we don't record it in advance, this is live.
No, of course.
But if we do record the episode around midday, and then a whole bunch of crazy stuff happens in the news before the episode premieres live at 9 o'clock Eastern time, as always.
Yeah.
Then, I mean, it'll just be irrelevant, right? Like,
sure.
Like I could say, well, did you see where Michigan went for Kanye, and then come the evening time they say, well, no, in fact, it wasn't Kanye, it was Joe Biden, and then we would look like idiots.
Yeah.
Because the last thing we need any help, right? We don't need any help looking like idiots.
Very true.
Blake, guess what I did?
What did you do?
I finally watched the first episode of season 2 of The Mandalorian.
Yes. Isn't it awesome? Isn't it great?
It was good. It was good. Now, I know what some people at home might be thinking that watch this show is, now, wait a minute, isn't that on that same network that you were just saying a few weeks ago was thanking the Chinese Communist Party because they filmed their Mulan movie over there by the...
It wasn't Mulan, so that's okay, I guess.
By the concentration camps.
Yeah.
And the answer is yes, that is true.
Uh-huh.
And that's all I got.
Yeah. Maybe it's a concentration camp full of Yodas?
Well, I mean, at least the cast of The Mandalorian didn't thank the Chinese Communist Party for letting them shoot.
Very true.
Where they, so Tatooine is not where the Uyghur Muslims are being genocided.
Yes.
So now
maybe the Sand people are, but
Blake, be careful. You're going to get us in trouble.
It's Tusken Raiders, I know.
Well, you're gonna get us in so much trouble. So I just want to say really quickly something serious before we go to our first break. Is I got up this morning earlier than I wanted to.
Okay.
If you know me, if I'm up before noon, I'm up earlier than I want to be.
Yeah, that's crazy, man.
And I pull up social media because even though I kind of already have my show notes ready and we're going to talk to our buddy Mike Maharrey today, and he and I had already discussed the show, I like to look, because you never know, like maybe I would get on and they would say, oh, look, Hurricane Katrina's back for more, or, whatever.
Okay.
So I go on there and there's this story trending on Twitter that says, Pennsylvania postal worker recounts allegations of voter fraud.
Okay.
Now, that's not really what today's episode is about. It's this whole big thing. You can go look it up if you want to. But basically, there was this postal worker in Pennsylvania that had gotten with James O'Keefe or whatever from Project Veritas, and he was talking about, hey, I was witness to, I overheard some conversations from some of the higher ups that were suggesting doing things that I believe are against election laws here in the state of Pennsylvania. And then Twitter then turned around this morning and was saying, oh no, he recounted all that. It was fake news. The affidavit that the sworn affidavit that he had signed, that was all BS. So no story here. Let's move on. And they were saying that was being reported by like the Washington Post and the New York Times and all this stuff. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to click on this just because that could totally be. Yeah. But that just doesn't sound right because like literally, this is another deal where I went to bed and the story was one thing and then I woke up and the story was a different thing. It seems like that's not right.
Yeah.
So I look it up and sure enough, no, he did not recount his allegations whatsoever. He has not backed off of his statements in his sworn affidavit. He is still available to be interviewed, to be questioned in front of like a congressional panel. And for his part in O'Keefe, the Project Veritas guy, he was actually pointing out that this guy was being targeted now by the U.S. Postal Service. Big shocker there, right? Targeting a whistleblower. And he had a GoFundMe that had raised money, and then GoFundMe suspended his campaign.
Goodness.
And then, but like literally, here's the guy. I think his name is Hopkins. Here's Mr. Hopkins. Here's him saying, I have not recounted my allegations. That is not true. But if you go on Twitter, it's just hundreds of thousands, millions of people liking and sharing. Oh no, he recounted. Fake news. And now they've moved on to, Britney Spears has failed to get her father off of her conservatorship. That's now supplanted. That's old news. We're now on to Britney Spears. And so the point I'm bringing up is that that story hasn't played out enough for me to really have an opinion one way or the other. I absolutely think there's shenanigans going on with the election. But you know what? Guess what, guys? There's shenanigans going on with every election.
Yeah.
The point I'm trying to make is that I'm not even here to comment about specifically the situation in Pennsylvania.
Right.
What I'm commenting about is just look how easy it is for them to take a story, decide which way they're going to play it, and it's over.
Yeah.
Just like that, it's over.
Yep. You're going to get the news you're going to get no matter what you want.
So that's why all I can tell people is it's kind of like diversifying your portfolio, right? You got to diversify your reach. If you're a content creator like us here at It's Too Late, you have to kind of get out there on as many platforms as you can because you just never know.
Yeah,
you just never know what the reach is going to be. You never know what the algorithms are going to do. You never know when the mob might come for you and you might need to have a place to retreat to.
Yep.
So, we're on Facebook. I know a lot of people complain about Facebook. We do too, but we're on there because we're doing the best we can.
Yep.
We're on Twitter. I know I was just saying that about Twitter, but we're on Twitter. All we can do is do our best to like and share people that we support.
Right.
And we're also on Parler. So you can go to Parler at Alan Mosley. I know we have forgotten a few weeks to mention that, but we're on Parler now too. And, I don't know. I mean, and there's Gab and MeWe and Minds and Locals and all these other places. All I can tell people is I was actually talking to our friend Mike Maharrey right before we started the show, and he was telling me, I'm kind of reluctant to get invested in a lot of those because you just don't know which one of those are going to really be around, and you really don't know if they're going to be doing anything different with their algorithms than Facebook or Twitter. And I guess all I can say is that I understand that, and it's just a ton of work to constantly be I hate it. You know me, I hate it. This is why our show is dying, because I hate promoting. But I don't denigrate anybody who is looking for an alternative, because we absolutely need one. Yeah. Absolutely. So we'll try.
Speaking of alternative, man, I've noticed on my Facebook lately the mass exodus to Parler. It's been crazy. Like almost all my friends have just jumped on Parler. It's
Well, I've seen people saying they're going to Parler, but I've also seen people come right back and say I didn't like it because I didn't like the interface or whatever.
Goes what you're saying, have your feet in both tubs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If nothing else, we say on this program you can have your cake and eat it too.
That's right.
Except for me, I'm on a diet. I just feel like crap today.
That's because you're on a diet.
If that's why it is, then I should just go have a pizza.
That's right, and cake.
Cake pizza cake.
Wouldn't that be something?
I'm sure it exists. If you can think it exists, man.
I know.
Guys, we will be right back with more right after this break. Don't go away. If you're enjoying tonight's show, consider supporting the program by becoming a member of our Patreon. That's over at patreon.com/Alan Mosley. So, guess who just walked in?
Who?
Look who it is! It's Mike Maharrey!
There he is!
Hey!
Wait, hold on. That's not the shirt I remember you wearing.
Well, I was in the green room hanging out, waiting for my entrance, and so I changed my shirt because I was wearing Mickey Mouse in honor of the election, but you couldn't see Mickey, so it just looked like I was wearing a gray t-shirt, and that didn't seem proper attire for It's Too Late with Alan Mosley. So I spiffed up a little bit back in the green room, and here we are, right?
Well, here we are, exactly. Now you and I are going to get to the serious news in the next couple of segments. But do you want to join us for Meme of the Week and Viewer Mail?
Well, heck yeah.
Absolutely. Hey, Blake.
Yeah.
What time is it?
Meme of the Week.
Cheer up, kid. Everything's better now. Can my daddy finally come home from fighting in Afghanistan? That's a big fat no.
No.
Now, some people may have noticed, this isn't always true, but some people may have noticed that, sometimes our meme of the week is sort of like tangentially related to what we're going to talk about later in the episode. Yeah. So tonight's episode is actually titled The More Things Change, ...
Right.
The more they stay the same. Yeah. For the layman who doesn't get the reference. So we will come back to that topic a little bit later in the show. But until then, let's answer some viewer mail. Time for that part of the show. Blake questions from the same set of viewers of the week. We're just the only ones who stuck around after we're on all episodes. I'd like to think of the people who are like pausing and thinking back to read that. That's
wow.
story of my life, right?
I couldn't even read that. It just went by so fast,
First question is from Clay Davis, who writes, Dear Alan and Blake and Mike, give us your best, the drunkest I ever was story. Mike, what's the drunkest you ever was story?
Well, given that I really don't drink more than one beer at a time, I've never been drunk enough to have a drunk story.
This is really bad news for Clay because I don't drink. So I don't have the drunkest I ever was story. And I'm pretty sure Blake doesn't really drink either.
I don't drink either.
So
you're talking to a bunch of normal dudes.
Yeah, just a bunch of squares.
Yeah, a bunch of square britches over here.
Just, the only thing I imbibe is the warming glow of Christ.
There you go.
I like how everyone else on the program is laughing when I said that. What does that mean? What does that mean? Celeste Anist writes, Dear Alan and Blake and Mike, what do you typically impulse buy when you go shopping? Mike, what do you impulse buy?
My big impulse buy is food.
Yeah.
And it really doesn't matter what kind of food, just food.
Yeah.
And I'm on a diet too, so I really want food.
This is just like the most depressing point in the show. Yeah.
And we don't drink, we don't eat.
Yeah, we don't really. We just love the Lord. That's just it. That's all we do.
That's what we do. Yes, we do.
So I don't know. I guess if I was going to be specific and not just say just food as a blanket statement, like what they always say is like if you're going to go grocery shopping, like don't go on an empty stomach.
Yeah.
Because then like you're hungry, so you pick things out. I'll tell you what I used to do. I don't do this anymore because I'm just a depressing loser. But I used to think like me. So me and Anna Kay, sometimes we'd really hard up for like a Reese's cup. So we'd run down to like the corner gas station to get like the king size Reese's cup thing, and we would share it.
Yeah.
So sometimes then I'd be at the grocery store and I would think, man, the gas station's just robbing me blind. Like I'm paying $4 for this one container of Reese cups. Yeah. So I'll just buy the whole bag of Reese cups from the grocery store to save me. This is how you rationalize it, right? Like look guys, I'm just saving money. I'm just saving money as I'm just fisting Reese's cups, just 4 or 5 at a time. I'm saving money. So, Reese cups.
This is exactly why I buy the king size bag of M&Ms.
There you go.
Ooh, aha! See, now we're
intelligence
getting down
prevails.
To it. Yeah.
Saving money.
That's right.
So for people at home to understand, Mike told us we had to have a bowl of only green M&Ms in the green room for him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have done the show.
What do you say about that?
Yeah, and they were all brown.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Suzanne Sherman writes, Dear Alan and Blake, for mashed potatoes, skin on or skin off? Blake, you sound like you have an opinion.
Skin off.
Skin off?
You put skin in my mashed potatoes, I'm going to throw it at you.
Wow. That's he's willing to violate the nap over the skin of a potato.
Just nasty.
Why we got way too many food-oriented questions.
That's
on the
because you're all on
program.
diets.
Yeah. You know what the thing about, so first of all, skin off. And second of all, you know what mashed potatoes is for me? Do you ever have those foods where you used to just eat them nonstop, like they were one of your favorite things, and then at some point during the same, like simultaneously during a time that you eat that food, you get very ill, and then like it kills your taste buds for it?
Ooh.
That happened for me with mashed potatoes.
Really?
Yeah. So like when I was a little kid, like my plate would just be a mountain of mashed potatoes and like 2 green beans.
There you go.
And that was sustenance for me.
Yeah.
And now I can't stand mashed potatoes.
Wow, you ruined it for yourself.
Well, yeah. Well, I was sick.
Well, there you go.
Maybe when I was like 12, I got the Rona and nobody knew it.
There you go. Maybe.
So I go against the flow. I can actually go with skin in the mashed potatoes. Like I can go either way. I like mashed potatoes both ways, but I don't mind the skin being in them. You know, the nutrients are in the skin, so I'm told.
Well, hey, Mike, you have to admit, though, that's like the lazy chef's way of making it. Come on.
Yeah,
Boys, throw
true.
them in there and smash them up.
All right, so Suzanne, so it's 2-1, no skin, but Blake takes it a step further and says you're a lazy piece of crap.
Right, and he will kill you if you put
That's what he
leave the
said.
skin
Ruin
in.
my mashed potatoes.
Andrew Avery writes, Dear Alan and Blake, will a statistician stop at nothing to avoid negative numbers? Jeff Johnson writes, this Thanksgiving, who would you like to give the bird to? Blake, who would you like to give the bird to?
What do you think, Mike? I'll get to you.
I tell you what, that is a long and illustrious list.
Just give us one. I mean, 'tis the season after all.
Oh gosh. The referee who called me for a tripping penalty because the dude tripped over my stick when I was poking the puck away from him in the game last week. That would be a start.
Yeah, there you go. Ugh.
It's a bad call.
This is turning into an episode of
Yes.
Sports Ball before our eyes.
Yeah. I'm too nice. I'm not allowed to say it.
What are we? This isn't sports ball.
No.
No, there's
Oh,
no yellow
crap.
thing, man. Come on.
This is the first moment in this episode that I looked down at the clock because I just had that brief moment of terror of we're way off schedule.
Nah, we're good.
We're actually not way off
No,
schedule.
we're good.
But now that I'm sharing a meta anecdote, we will be.
Yeah.
Lyle Durio asks, Dear Alan and Blake and Mike, do any of you guys ski or snowboard? Mike, do you ski or snowboard?
I have skied on a few occasions, but they were all at Paoli Peaks in Indiana, and that can hardly be categorized as actually skiing.
Blake, have you ever skied?
I
or
would if
snowboarded?
there was snow.
Yeah,
All I got is mud.
I was just
Everywhere.
about to say. So I've never skied or snowboarded. It's not that I'm like against it, like in earnest. It's more that just I'm from Tennessee. So what's snow?
No.
Like I mean, we just roll down our hills.
Yeah,
that's what we do.
It's pathetic.
Yeah.
We don't have any fun here.
Last one. Bob Smiley writes, Dear Alan and Blake and Mike, how would you like to receive the COVID vaccine? Mike, how would you like to receive the COVID vaccine?
Well, I would prefer not to receive it at all.
Me
Let's
too.
be real honest there.
Yeah, well, but Bob really insists. He's inviting you to share in his joy.
Well, then I want them to stick it right in my rear end.
How many orderlies is it going to take to hold you down? And are they men?
Yeah, no, I hope not.
Like this, we're trying to be professional on this show, and like every single time you go, so you've been to Mike, and he's talked about having it both ways. He's talking about wanting to stick it right in his rear end, and the whole time the camera's on him, I'm over here just doing that the whole damn time. What about you, Blake?
Oh. You know, it would take a lot. They're going to have to pull me out in my front yard, hold me down, a bunch of cops put guns to my head and take that needle and shove it in my neck. Yeah.
Dang.
I'm not taking it. Sorry.
It wasn't in the neck.
Well, yeah, because if you're going to get it, you might as well get it like right in the jugular, you know, wherever it hurts.
I want them to pour it on one of them one chip challenges, and we'll do that. One chip challenge, but now with Rona vaccine.
There you go.
Yeah.
That might actually work.
I wonder if they would counteract one another.
Probably.
I wonder what that says about the Rona vaccine if it's stronger than the ghost pepper.
I don't know.
Ooh.
These are all good questions.
They are.
But
And
we
they
don't
can
have any
be
more time.
answered. I know.
Let's go ahead and take a commercial break. Your ad could be playing right now, reaching thousands of potential customers. Sadly, it's not, but it could be. Find out how to be an advertised sponsor for It's Too Late with Alan Mosley. Email us at alan@funnybroke.com. Our guest today is the National Communications Director of the 10th Amendment Center, as well as you can find his numerous books, blog posts, episodes of his various podcasts, including Godarchy. You can find all of that at michaelmaharrey.com. Michael Maharrey! You know him as Mike. Mike, how are you doing?
I'm doing just fantastic. Except for the brown M&Ms that were left in the green room. That was disappointing. But other than that, this is great. It's great to be on the show.
You know, this isn't exactly what we were going to talk about, but I want to get this out of the way really quick. What episode of Godarchy are you on now?
Well, I quit numbering them, so I don't know. I think it's like 54, 55, somewhere in that ballpark.
And who is the only two-time guest of that program?
Well, it was you.
Was?
Yes, we're about to have our second two-time guest in the next episode.
Garbage. Well,
But currently, you are the only two-time guest.
unsubscribed. So, Mike, the name of tonight's episode is The More Things Change. And you and I decided, we got two segments today, and we decided for the first segment, we were going to talk a little bit about, like, obviously the election is still in the news. Some very poor, naive, damn fools think the election hasn't been decided yet. It has.
Right.
But that being neither here nor there, your take is not so much being concerned about who ultimately is declared the winner. Your concern that you said to me was more of, well, but what difference does it make?
Basically.
So
Yeah. So, no, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say. So we're gonna assume, I think safely for the sake of this episode, that Joe Biden will be the next president of the United States. But that being neither here nor there, what type of drastic changes to the world, starting with the economy or foreign policy or wherever you want to begin, can we expect in a Biden administration?
Well, if you're somebody that cares about liberty, or if you're somebody who cares about the Constitution, which at the 10th Amendment Center, that's important to us. Mm-hmm. If you're concerned about limited government, then absolutely nothing is going to change. I wrote a book back in 2012 called Our Last Hope, Rediscovering the Lost Path to Liberty. It's about nullification. And I was going back and I was looking at the last chapter of that book the other day. And in there, I talked about the fact that Barack Obama promised hope and change, and yet we still had the same thing we had during the Bush administration. We still had the Patriot Act spying. We still had the endless wars. Mm-hmm. The debt and spending was still going up. You know, all of these things that we hate were still happening under Obama. There was no change despite all of the hope. And I said at the time that the Republicans are saying, well, when we take over, it's all going to be different. We're going to fix it all. So then we've had 4 years of Donald Trump, and he added $7 trillion to the national debt. We still have the endless wars. The Patriot Act is still firmly in place. Obamacare is still in place. So again, practically speaking, very little has changed other than the rhetoric and the fact that we had a much more interesting White House Twitter feed than we did under Obama. And my prediction is that when Biden gets into the office, and I did say when, sorry, but when Biden's in the White House, I think we're still going to have the endless wars. The national debt's going to continue to go upward. The Patriot Act will not be repealed. Obamacare will probably be expanded. So all of these things just continue on a regular trajectory. And I've said this for a long time. If you are somebody who is concerned about liberty, if you're concerned about limited government, fixing or changing out the person who is in the Oval Office is going to make no difference. It's like a broken down car. and it's up on blocks and the engine doesn't work, and it doesn't make a damn bit of difference what driver you put in the driver's seat. The system itself is broken, and I have no faith in any national federal politician to fix it.
Well, as loath as I am to do it, I'm going to play devil's advocate here a little bit.
Uh-oh.
So I'm
Okay, here we go.
I'm gonna start with one thing that you had mentioned. You had mentioned Obamacare, Patriot Act, some of these different things. Now, hold on a second. I have been told time and again, particularly from right-wing sources, particularly because we just had a Republican president, that one of the most important things you get is the guy in charge who can appoint Supreme Court justices. And of course, as was just recently the news, they rushed through the confirmation of Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court. Now, I don't want to necessarily rehash discussing ACB herself. And I'm not one of these people who thinks that was necessarily an issue in a vacuum. Like, look, if there was a Democrat in the White House, they absolutely would have moved to fill that seat before the election. You'd be a hypocrite to say otherwise. With that said, though, hold on a second, Mike. Is that not a legacy of the Trump administration that, okay, we got another conservative judge, so who cares about Biden coming to office? We've got the votes. We're going to overturn Roe v. Wade. We're going to get rid of Obamacare. You're trying to tell me that's not the case?
Bad news, folks. That's another broken down car. So you can change out the 9 drivers. I don't know how you have 9 drivers in a car, but that's what they do over there at the Supreme Court. No, it's not going to change anything. The dirty little secret is that Roe v. Wade was a majority Republican court that came up with that travesty. So, yeah, and here's the dirty little secret about the court. There are definitely ideological differences in the court. The problem is that they are all wedded to the system. They are all wedded to this idea that precedent is sacrosanct. So they're not going to overturn these landmark cases because basically that would be admitting fallibility in the court, and we can't have that,
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, Obamacare is too. It's firmly established, and we've already seen hints. There's an Obamacare case that's up now. We've already seen hints that they're going to let it stand. Roe v. Wade's not going to be overturned. You're never going to overturn something like Wickard versus Filburn, where the Supreme Court basically gave the federal government control over every economic activity, despite the very limited nature of the Commerce Clause. None of that is ever going to change. So all you can hope for with the conservative court is it may slow down the progression, but they're not going to overturn these precedents. They don't believe in it. It's against their legal dogma, and their legal dogma ranks above their ideological preferences.
Okay, now I'm going to harken back to our meme of the week from the previous segment. So you talked about how even though Donald Trump was in office, we had the debt, we have the wars, yada yada yada. But I've been told by all the right-wing sources that Donald Trump was a peace president. That look, he's withdrawing the troops from Germany. The troops are going to be home by Christmas from Afghanistan. We didn't start any new wars. And of course, Biden, because he's just round 2 of the Obama administration. Here come the drone bombings. Here comes Syria, Libya, Yemen, all that. So where am I wrong on that?
Well, again, the rhetoric is much different from the reality when it comes to Trump's record as a peace president. And he has done some admittedly better things, I guess. We could argue that he has wound down the war in Afghanistan to some degree, but the fact of the matter is that he dropped more bombs in Afghanistan than Obama did. And while we are all focused on Afghanistan, he has ratcheted up the war in Somalia. Yes, we have a war in Somalia. Did you know that? And he dropped more bombs in Somalia just over the last few months than Bush and Obama did combined. Then we also have the ongoing genocidal war in Yemen, which Trump actually had the opportunity to end and vetoed it when Congress tried to withdraw support for that war in backing of the Saudis. Trump pulled out his veto pen. He also vetoed several attempts to cut spending for that war in Yemen. So maybe we've rearranged the chairs on the Titanic deck a little bit with Trump in office, but the wars have still gone on. The carnage is still gone on. The bombs are still falling. And the fact of the matter is, despite all the rhetoric, there are still troops in Afghanistan. There are still troops in Iraq. There are still troops in Syria. And we have even hotter wars going on now in Somalia and Yemen. And then not to mention all of the little bitty wars that nobody ever reports on that are going on all over Africa. So, I just don't buy the rhetoric. And again, we could argue that it's marginally better or marginally worse with one president or one party in control. But that's really like arguing that my drink is only 10% poison instead of 12% poison.
Okay, but so you had mentioned what was it, 7 trillion, whatever ridiculous amount that's been added to the national debt. Now, Mike, these are unprecedented times. And,
yes, they are.
And Donald Trump has been there to try to guide the economy through this pandemic. So we can, of course, understand government spending in this particular era. But when Biden gets in, it's just going to be unbridled spending from the word go.
Yeah, this is the easiest one to debunk of all of them because you can't numbers don't lie, as the saying goes. Let's go back to 2019, which, as you will recall, was the wonderful time before the coronavirus pandemic. You remember that? We used to actually be able to go outside. It was fun. 2019, the Trump administration ran up the largest deficit that we had seen since the Obama years. It was the 5th largest deficit in the history of the United States during a time when supposedly we were in an economic boom. Now, people who understand the way the cycles of spending go understand that generally when you're in an economic boom, government spending drops, the debt drops because you have more economic activity. That means more taxes are collected. That means generally deficits tend to shrink during economic good times. No, not when Trump's president, because he ratcheted up spending so much. We still managed to run the 5th largest deficit in the history of the United States before the coronavirus. And in the first 2 months of fiscal 2020, before we even got to the coronavirus pandemic, we were already on track for a $1 trillion budget deficit for this fiscal year before coronavirus, which is actually only happened under Obama. So basically, if you're going to make the argument, Trump was the same as Obama when it came to the debt and spending.
Well, before we move on to the last segment today, well, we're going to change our tone. So for people who are watching still, they're like, "Ugh, I can't bear anymore." We got some silver linings. We're going to talk a little bit about the good news of election 2020 in the next segment. But before we get there, I just want to kind of end this part of the talk on this note, Mike. It's something that you and I discussed before the show, which is how I don't know if how come or why or if this is just more of a rhetorical question than anything, but a lot of people keep saying, well, if Trump is destined to leave office, then you know what he should do? He should pardon Edward Snowden. He should pardon Julian Assange. He should pardon Ross Ulbricht. You know what he should do? He should declassify everything. Declassify JFK. Declassify UFOs. Declassify Watergate. You know what he should do? He should withdraw all the troops from Afghanistan, Iraq. The list goes on and on and on while he's still the commander-in-chief. He should do all those things because that's going to stick it in the crawl of those global elites that are taking over. But he hasn't done any of those things in the last 4 years.
Right.
So how, I guess I'm just tossing you like the softest of softballs. How naive is all that crap, Mike?
Yeah, that's naive crap. I mean, he should do all of those things.
Sure.
Let's make no mistake,
Okay.
But he's had that opportunity all along. And there's this persistent myth. I got this email yesterday, in fact, from some guy who's convinced that when it's all said and done, Donald Trump is going to be in the White House for the next 4 years.
Ugh.
And you know what he told me?
What?
Here's what's going to happen in the next 4 years. Trump is going to throw out all of the bankers, and we're going back on a gold standard.
Well, it's just the question that I like to ask people. The quickest way to get yourself blocked or to lose subscribers is if you have one that thinks the kind of tripe you just said. And the only response you have to give him is that, so what prevented him from doing that yesterday?
Right.
I mean, did he not agree with that position yesterday, but he now does? It just this whole draining the swamp thing. I mean, if there's no lasting legacy at all, is that we will remember this as the era of fake news. Not that there isn't, there is.
Right.
And of the phrase of draining the swamp. But
yeah, I'm afraid the drain's got a lot of hair in it.
But while you and I could sit here and we could concede that maybe there are a few points that Trump has been less than terrible on. Maybe there are some reasons why we are not optimistic about a Biden presidency. There's plenty of reasons for those. At the end of the day, we were all sold a bill of goods that Donald Trump, this mavericky old, as John McCain used to be on SNL, this outsider, this non-lifelong politician, he was going to drain the swamp. But the first thing he did was appoint people like Mike Pompeo and John Bolton.
Mm-hmm.
That should have been the biggest red of red flags from day one, that it was going to be Washington status quo. Has that not been, in your estimation, what ultimately the Trump administration was?
Yeah, I really think that we should relegate the phrase "Make America Great Again" into the same pile as hope and change.
Ooh.
Because it was basically the exact same thing.
Yikes. You heard it there, folks. So we're going to change our tune. We're going to talk about some silver linings when we come back from the break. Don't go away. What perfect timing for the Path to Liberty 10th Amendment Center commercial than to be right before this segment right here. Go ahead and pull up that website really quick. There's the 10th Amendment Center website. 10th Amendment Center, is it .com or .org?
.com.
So you can check it out right there. I mean, it's just always loaded with tons and tons of goodies. Mike Maharrey, who's joining us today, is the National Communications Director of the 10th Amendment Center. So you can find even more Mike awesomeness over there at TAC. And of course, our friend Michael Bolden as well, which, by the way, our new fun thing that Bolden and I do is he shares with me some of the lovely private messages he gets, like you shared in the last segment, the email you got. And our new segment is I'll come on and do a dramatic reading of one of those responses. So with TAC in mind, we were going to do a segment that we affectionately called "How I Went from Being a Libtard to a Nazi Overnight."
Yeah, the transition is almost complete.
So what do we mean by that? What kind of monsters do you guys fight? Often privately, outside of the public purview, Mike.
Yeah, so I joined up with the 10th Amendment Center back in like 2010, or was it 2011? Somewhere back in that. It was during the Obama years. And the Tea Party was raging, and the right, the conservatives, Republicans, they loved the 10th Amendment Center because we were sticking it to Barack Obama.
Sure.
We were talking about all of the unconstitutional actions that he was taking, holding him to task, working at the state and local level to undermine all of those federal programs and constitutional overreaches that were going on. And we were much beloved by the folks on the right.
Sure.
And then we had Donald Trump ascend to power, take up residence in the White House. And I have to wait. I forgot the most important thing. During that time, we were loathed by Democrats and folks on the left, and were regularly accused of being neo-Confederates, racists, and Nazis,
Sure.
because that's what all of us right wingers are, right? Well, and then Trump arrives on the scene. He takes up residence, and we continue to do the exact same thing that we did the previous years. We continue to call out the president on unconstitutional actions and seek at the state and local level to undermine those federal overreaches. And all of a sudden, all of those people who loved me back in 2013, 2014, now all of a sudden they hated me, and I turned into a libtard. And I have the emails to prove it. And I was regularly lambasted by folks on the right as a libtard, a left winger, a socialist, a commie, all of those things. And now we're going to have Biden, and the tide is about to flow back. And I will no longer be a libtard or a communist. I will once again be a neo-Confederate, a Nazi, and probably a white supremacist, because we've upped the ante from racist to white supremacist now. So those things will be back, and the left will hate us again. And at the 10th Amendment Center, we will continue to do the exact same thing that we've done the past however many years it's been. We're going to keep calling out the president on his unconstitutional actions and undermining federal power through state and local action, because that's what we do.
Well, and I know you guys have the receipts, which is probably the best part, is that while public opinion ebbs and flows based on whether or not Magai is in office or not, you guys have been completely consistent. You can go to the 10th Amendment Center website and see in years past articles hammering the exact same points. And
Yep.
And to be fair, Mike, I got to tell you, something that we had actually said on this show months ago now at this point is that we're going to try to get out of the habit of kind of doing like the outrage porn of, oh, look who's a hypocrite, because they're all hypocrites, right? Like they're all hypocrites. Right. So, I mean, we could make every single week's episode, look who's a hypocrite this week. And so on the one hand, I don't want to do too much of that because I'm trying to stick to my word. But on the other hand, I just have to ask, or just have you highlight just the simple fact that not only is this a regular phenomenon that you guys can sort of kind of count on at this point, and it does affect your bottom line because people are financially supporting your organization because they think you're a weapon against their political opponents, and then all of a sudden, you know, the turns are tabled, as they say.
Right.
But I guess ultimately what I want to get at is that how we know that people are hypocrites. We know that. But is there ever a moment in time that you take a step back, you get some of those emails, you see some of those stories, that you ever take a step back and say, what would it take to move beyond that narrative? What would it take in terms of you guys? What kind of message would you have to deliver where you would transcend just purely partisan hackery, just left, right, whoever's in office, it totally affects your bottom line? What topics could you possibly discuss that are going to be seen as favorable either way? Is there such a topic?
I don't know that there is, because everything is so politicized in this left-right paradigm. But the thing that makes me optimistic is that with every swing, I feel like we're shaving people off of the edges that wake up and get it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we had a lot of people that were Tea Partiers, people that Michael Bolden fondly calls partisan hacks, who abandoned us as soon as their guy was in the White House. But there were a small segment of people that looked at it and said, wait a minute, you know, this guy's doing the same thing that the last guy was doing. We believe in the Constitution. We believe in these principles, and they stuck with this. And through the last 4 years, we have seen some folks that are more left-leaning begin to embrace the ideas of decentralization, of nullification, of devolving federal power, because they recognize that that power that they had been accumulating through the Obama years was suddenly weaponized and turned against them. And I'm certain that a lot of those folks, now that, their guy is in the White House, they'll go right back to wanting to centralize power and impose things from the top down. But I think there will be those that are left on the edges that will have a memory, and they'll think, you know what? We need to be careful with this. We need to be wise with this. So I think every swing, kind of shaves off those edges and adds to the number of people who are taking a more principled, consistent approach to decentralization and devolving power away from Washington, D.C., because it becomes very obvious every time we have these switches that every bit of power that you give your guy, when he's in charge, is ultimately going to fall into the hands of the bad guy at some point. And so the wise thing to do is not to give any of these people any power and keep the power as decentralized and diffused as possible. So in some ways, I'm optimistic. And as frustrating as it is to get those emails and have to deal with the rhetoric, I feel like we're doing a great service to humanity by maintaining that consistent principle that we can stick to and stand by. And nobody can come at us and say, well, you said this then and this now. No, we've said, our standard is the Constitution when it comes to the federal government. And so it doesn't matter whether we have a Joe Biden or a Donald Trump or a Barack Obama or whoever comes next, because as the title of the show is, the more things change, the more they stay the same, and the 10th Amendment Center stays the same.
Well, speaking of silver linings from election 2020, and I noticed an article that you guys just recently had where you were talking about sort of the political strategies of the gun people, which typically is associated with the right, versus the drug people, which are typically associated with the left. And you had made the point that, I really wish the gun people would look at some of the strategies and have the same fervor for their issue as the drug people have, because the drug people are making gains politically. So where are we at with that, with this election cycle and the drug war?
Well, you're absolutely right. And if you look at the success of, I like to call them the weed people, the potheads are much braver than the gun people. The potheads in 1996, they finally said, screw this. We're not going to get any changes at the federal level. So they just legalized medical marijuana in California. And then, from there, we now have 36 states that have legalized marijuana in some way. Despite ongoing unconstitutional federal prohibition. It's been highly successful because the federal government simply cannot enforce prohibition without state and local cooperation. The exact same thing is true of firearms. If state and local governments simply said, we're not going to enforce federal gun control, it's not going to get enforced because the ATF doesn't have the personnel or resources. It depends on state and local law enforcement. So you could take this same strategy, the weed strategy, and you could apply it to firearms, and you could have equal success. Unfortunately, the gun people tend to rely on sending a bunch of money to the feckless NRA, or hoping that the next president, will be better. I mean, Trump was supposed to be the Second Amendment president, but what did Trump do? He actually ratcheted up enforcement of federal gun control all three of the past 3 years, and on top of that, implemented his own gun control, which was the bump stock ban. And meanwhile, the weed people are continuing to make gains. In this past election, 5 more states passed voter referendums that either expanded their marijuana legalization or legalized it for the first time. So we now have 15 states with recreational legal marijuana, and of all states, Mississippi legalized by a broad margin medical marijuana. So the reddest of red states, they're going to have weed in Mississippi.
Well,
so I think that's a good news.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was going to point that out. So Mississippi is one, and the reason I'm bringing this up is that it's a beautiful thing, isn't it? When there's a issue that has a groundswell of public support, and they attack it on the state level, and they go to the 10th Amendment, they go to nullification, and they just take the federal government out of the equation. I was going to bring up South Dakota as well, and you might correct me on this. South Dakota, which I think is pretty fair to say, is a pretty red state. I believe that they were the first state to go from having no state ruling on marijuana to having both medical and recreational passed at the same time. And so does it give you hope for the future to see a collection of traditional blue and red states kind of both shrugging off of the federal yoke, at least on certain issues? And then my follow-up question to that will be, before we wrap up, is what is the strategy then? If the lefties have managed to get some of the righties on board with nullifying the drug war, then what will be the strategy for the righties to get maybe the lefties on board and use their strategy to attack gun control?
Yeah. So you're correct. South Dakota was the very first state to go from complete prohibition to legalizing both medical and recreational. So the typical pathway has been, you get medical first, and that's kind of the foot in the door, and then years down the road you have recreational legalized. They actually passed two separate referendums and legalized both. So good job, South Dakota. I think that the pattern that we've seen play out, this has taken a long time. So, I mentioned that California first legalized medical marijuana was 1996. So, we're talking more than 15 years of efforts to get to the point that we are now. And in the early days, the states that were legalizing even medical were very blue states. So you had California, you had Oregon, you had Washington State, you had Colorado. Those first states were, they were as blue as you can get.
Mm-hmm.
And then gradually we started to see some of the purple states, and then now we've gotten to the point where we've had Utah and Mississippi and Arkansas and some of these states that you would think, wow, those guys would never legalize marijuana. And I think part of it's just the psychology that happens when you do something that has been prohibited, and you can look at it and say, oh my God, the world did not collapse. California legalized medical marijuana, and things went on, and we don't have, people dying of marijuana overdoses, which isn't a thing. But people recognize that it's not nearly the nightmare scenario that they're told. Then other people think, well, maybe this isn't such a bad idea. So the idea grows in the public. And I think we could see the same thing happen with firearms. I think it's highly possible that if you started in some states that are really red, a Texas or an Alabama or a Kentucky where there's a gun culture, and they start not enforcing federal gun control, and people recognize, wait a minute, it wasn't a nightmare scenario. This is just fine. Then you might start to see that same type of spread into more blue states along the line. And I think there is some, just overall, when it comes to firearms, you're seeing a lot more. I was just reading an article the other day from, I think it's ammo.com, and it was talking about the fact that there's been a huge surge in concealed carry permits by African Americans. You've seen growth in organizations like Black Guns Matter. So there are people that are reaching these more traditionally left-wing constituencies, and they're more open with the idea of, hey, maybe it's a good idea to defend ourselves. You look at something like, we're going to defund the police. Well, then how are you going to protect yourself? So I think that I think we could see the same kind of momentum, but it's going to take concerted effort. It's going to take patience, and it's going to take a change in mentality from the folks who are driving this movement to get them to switch strategies and quit begging the Supreme Court to protect my rights, or trying to elect the Second Amendment president, and start working at the state and local level. And it's not as satisfying, because we all want this one size fits all solution that we can impose from Washington, D.C. And that's quick and easy, but it's not going to happen. So you need to do the hard work at the state and local level and follow that path that weed people have taken, and know that you're going to suffer some defeats along the way. I mean, when you go back to 1996, there were some people that sacrificed for legalized marijuana. I mean, it wasn't like the feds just said, oh, okay. They came in and they were aggressive in enforcement, and people lost their property and people went to jail. And you hear stories about the dispensaries being raided, and then folks coming in and opening them back up, by the end of the day. So we need that kind of mentality with the gun people. Have the guts of the weed people, gun people.
Well, Mike, I'm glad that you gave us the blueprint, because we're out of time.
Well, there you go.
Do you have a final thought, Mike? Where can people support Michael Maharrey?
Well, I think first place I would love people to go is to 10thamendmentcenter.com. We're about to ramp into the 2021 state legislative sessions. I think with the change of administration, there's going to be a lot of nullification efforts going on. I think one of the silver linings of this election is that Republicans will suddenly start to care about the Constitution again.
No.
And yes. And I think I think honestly, I think Republicans are better at being a opposition party than they are being in charge. So check out what we're doing over at the 10th Amendment Center and support the work that we're doing there, because we're directly pushing back against big government federal overreach. And then you can check out my website at michaelmaharrey.com. And if you're looking for a great Christmas present, you can get my book, Constitution Owner's Manual, and you can find out what the Constitution really means and says, and you can give that to your friends, because we're going to need that with a Biden presidency, just like we needed it with the Trump presidency.
So there you go, everybody who's listening is of a right-wing persuasion. It's not that we want you out of power. We just think you're just so gosh darn good at being the opposition party. That's what it is.
That's it.
Guys, we will be right back after this break. Like our Facebook page. It's facebook.com/AlanMosleyTV. You can follow me on Twitter, twitter.com/AlanMosleyTV. Find our whole library if you subscribe on YouTube. It's youtube.com/AlanMosleyTV. Also, don't forget, you can go to Parler. You can find me on Parler. I'm Parler @AlanMosley. Guys, thank you so much for listening to another episode of It's Too Late, and we will see you next week.